My name is Robert Miller. I'm 67 years old, and my story begins the day I buried my only daughter. We had just lowered her casket into the ground when my son-in-law, the man I once trusted like family, showed me the sharp edge of his true heart. That night, as I stepped back into the house I had owned for decades, he looked me in the eyes and said words that shattered me forever. With one cruel sentence, everything I thought I knew about family turned into dust. And that's when I realized my life was about to change in a way I could never undo. Backhand index pointing right before I share what happened next. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The morning of the funeral felt heavier than any morning of my life. The sky was gray, the air thick, and the town seemed quieter than usual, as if it knew grief had moved into my chest and wasn't planning to leave. I stood by my daughter's grave, my hands trembling as I held a flower I could barely let go of. She was only 34, too young, too full of life, too important to be gone. I had raised her alone since her mother passed when she was just 10. Every ounce of love I had was poured into her, and burying her felt like burying myself. My son-in-law, Mark, stood beside me during the service. He wore a black suit, but even from a distance I could see how stiffly he carried himself. He didn't shed a tear. Not one. I tried to push it aside. Everyone grieves differently, I told myself. But a small knot formed in my stomach. Something about his silence felt less like grief and more like distance, like the bond between us had already snapped. After the last words were spoken and the crowd began to scatter, I lingered near the grave. A few neighbors offered polite condolences, their eyes soft with pity, but no one lingered long. Funerals have a way of emptying a room quickly, leaving only the closest behind. For me, the closest was supposed to be Mark. Instead, I felt a wall growing between us by the hour. When we returned to the house, I carried the heavy quiet with me. My home had always been my safe place, the one spot in this world where love lived. It was a small, modest home in Ohio. White siding, a porch swing that creaked when the wind hit it right, and a front yard where my daughter once played with chalk on the sidewalk. The walls were filled with family pictures, her graduation, her wedding, her birthday dinners. Every photo was a piece of her life I had held on to. That night, after everyone left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my hands. They were old, lined with years of work, but strong enough to have raised a daughter alone. I thought Mark might sit with me, share a quiet word, maybe even break the silence that had weighed on us since morning. Instead, he walked in carrying an expression I couldn't read. "Robert," he said, his voice clipped and sharp, "we need to talk." I looked up, expecting maybe a conversation about how we'd manage without her, how grief might bind us instead of break us. But the moment his next words left his mouth, my blood ran cold. "This isn't your house anymore. Pack your things and go." At first, I thought I misheard him. My ears were still buzzing from the long day. But then his face hardened, and he pointed toward the door like I was some stranger. "Mark," I whispered, "I've lived here 40 years. I built this place with my own 2 hands. This is my home." His reply was venom disguised as words. "You're just an old man now. You're not needed. Go stay with beggars if you want. You don't belong here anymore." He walked over to the hallway closet, yanked my old suitcase out, and tossed it at my feet. My chest tightened as I watched him pull my coat off the rack and shove it into my arms. I tried to steady myself, my voice breaking. "Son, please, not tonight. Not after we buried her." But he wouldn't look me in the eyes. He grabbed my bags, opened the door, and pushed them onto the porch. The night air was freezing, sharp against my skin, but nothing cut as deep as the humiliation of standing outside my own house with the man I once called family glaring at me like an intruder. The neighbors saw. I noticed curtains shifting, faint silhouettes in the windows. No one stepped forward, though. They just watched quietly as an old man stood with his belongings scattered on the ground. Shame burned through me. For the first time in decades, I felt small, invisible, discarded. I picked up the suitcase, my hand shaking, and stepped off the porch. Every memory of my daughter, her laughter, her soft voice calling me Dad, the way she hugged me after tough days, all of it echoed inside the home I was no longer allowed to enter. The walk down the street felt endless. Each step was heavier than the last. I tried to tell myself this wasn't real, that maybe grief had warped his mind and tomorrow he would apologize. But deep down, I knew better. I had seen the coldness in his eyes, the emptiness in his tone. He wanted me gone. That night, I sat on the curb outside the house, staring at the dim porch light. My daughter's face smiled at me from the memory of her wedding day, when I handed her to Mark, trusting him to love and protect her. How foolish I felt now. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had betrayed her memory. As the hours dragged on, I wrestled with a storm inside me. Anger, sorrow, disbelief, all crashing together until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. By midnight, the street was empty, the world silent, and I realized I had no place to go. That was the moment my world collapsed. Not at the grave, not in the silence of the funeral, but right there on that curb, where the man who married my daughter showed me I was nothing to him. And yet, even in that darkness, something inside me shifted. The humiliation, the pain, it planted a seed. I didn't know what would grow from it yet, but I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of my story. The street was empty, but the silence felt heavier than the bags resting at my side. I sat there, staring at the dim glow of the porch light that used to welcome me home, now nothing more than a reminder of the door slammed in my face. The cold crept into my bones. 67 years of life had toughened me in many ways, but grief and humiliation make a man feel brittle, like a branch ready to snap. I pulled my coat tighter around my chest and tried to breathe steadily. My eyes darted to the houses across the street. Curtains moved again, the way they had when Mark threw me out. Neighbors had seen it all, yet none of them came outside. I couldn't blame them. They had families, routines, comfort inside their walls. Nobody wants to step into another man's disaster, especially not at night. Still, a part of me ached for someone to simply ask if I was okay. An hour passed before a figure approached. Mrs. Callahan, the elderly widow from next door, shuffled toward me in her slippers. She was clutching a shawl tight around her shoulders, her face pale under the porch light. "Robert," she whispered, her voice trembling. I saw what happened. Do you need me to call someone?" Her kindness almost broke me, but I couldn't bring myself to lean on her. She lived alone, barely managing on her pension. What help could she give me? I forced a weak smile. "No, thank you, Margaret. I'll be fine," I said softly, though we both knew it was a lie. She lingered, biting her lip as if she wanted to argue, then gave a sad nod. "If you need anything, knock on my door," she said, before retreating quickly into the safety of her home. The night dragged on. My breath clouded in the air. My fingers stiffened from the cold. I realized sitting here wasn't an option. I had to move. With each step, the wheels of my suitcase rattled against the cracked pavement, echoing down the quiet street. The sound was almost mocking, reminding me of how out of place I was in the neighborhood I had once belonged to. I wandered for blocks, unsure of where to go. My savings weren't much. I had planned to live simply, not start over at nearly 70. The thought of checking into a motel crossed my mind, but the idea of walking into one with my old suitcase and grief painted across my face made me feel exposed, judged. Instead, I followed the dim glow of a street lamp that seemed to point the way downtown. Eventually, I spotted a neon sign flickering above a brick building. "Community shelter, beds available." My chest tightened. I had never imagined stepping inside a place like that. Pride clawed at me, telling me to keep walking, but exhaustion won. I pushed the door open, greeted by the faint scent of disinfectant and the low murmur of voices. A woman at the front desk looked up. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a tired smile. "First time here?" she asked. "Yes," I admitted, my voice cracked and low. She slid a clipboard toward me. "We'll need your name, age, and any health concerns." I scribbled down my information with shaky hands. As I wrote my name, Robert Miller, 67, a wave of shame hit me. I had gone from homeowner to shelter resident in the span of a single day. The woman guided me to a narrow cot in a room filled with rows of them. Men of all ages sat hunched over, some dozing, others staring into space. A few nodded at me politely, but most kept to themselves. I set my suitcase down by the cot and sat, the springs creaking beneath my weight. Across from me, a younger man with a scruffy beard glanced up. "First night?" he asked. "Yeah," I muttered. He gave a dry chuckle. "Don't worry. The first night's the hardest. After that, you get used to it. Or at least, you tell yourself you do." His words were meant to comfort, but they felt like a warning. I lay back, staring at the ceiling where water stains formed strange shapes. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's face. Heard his voice telling me I was worthless, that I belonged with beggars. I rolled over, clutching my coat tighter, but the sounds of the shelter kept me awake. The shuffle of feet, the cough of a man down the row, the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. The world felt strange here, a place where time moved differently, where everyone carried invisible weight. At one point, I rose quietly and walked to the small window near the hallway. The city lights flickered in the distance. I pressed my palm to the glass, cold against my skin, and whispered to myself, "You're stronger than this, Robert. You've been through worse." But had I? Losing my wife had nearly broken me, but my daughter was there to pull me through. Now she was gone, and the one person I thought would stand beside me had shoved me into the street. As dawn crept in through the thin curtains, I realized I hadn't slept at all. My back ached, my eyes stung, and my chest felt heavy. The shelter staff began handing out paper cups of coffee and slices of bread. I accepted one, sipping slowly as the bitter liquid warmed my throat. Around me, men stretched, yawned, and prepared to face another day of surviving. A man at the next table struck up a conversation. "What brings you here?" he asked, his voice rough but curious. I hesitated. How do you explain betrayal that deep in a sentence or two? I simply said, "Family trouble." He nodded knowingly, as if he'd heard the same answer countless times. "You'll find your way," he said. "We all do somehow." I wanted to believe him, but as I sat there, staring at the steam rising from my cup, I knew one thing for certain. Last night had marked a turning point in my life. I had no home, no daughter, and no place where I felt I belonged. Still, as broken as I was, something inside whispered that I wasn't finished. I didn't know how or when, but I wasn't going to let that cruel night define the rest of my life. The bitter coffee in my hand had gone lukewarm, but I kept sipping it, more for the comfort of holding something warm than the taste itself. Around me, men shuffled in and out of the cafeteria, some exchanging tired jokes, others too lost in their own struggles to speak. I sat still, staring at the rising steam, when a wave of unease swept through me. It wasn't the shelter, nor the faces around me. It was the memories pressing in, uninvited, refusing to let me rest. I leaned back on the metal chair, my eyes drifting toward the window where the first weak rays of morning light struggled to break through the grime on the glass. That's when the shadows of the past came creeping. All night I had fought them, but with the daylight came no escape. I saw my daughter, Emily, not as the grown woman we buried, but as the little girl she once was, running barefoot across the front yard, her laughter carrying across the street. She had curly brown hair that bounced with every step and eyes that mirrored her mother's, deep and kind. I remembered sitting on that same porch swing that now belonged to Mark, watching her draw chalk rainbows on the sidewalk. For a moment, the memory almost warmed me. Almost. But grief doesn't leave memories untouched. Even the sweetest ones come with a sting. My heart clenched as I realized I'd never hear her voice again, never see her smile lighting up a room. First night always does that. A voice broke into my thoughts. I turned to see the younger man from the night before, the one with the scruffy beard, sliding into the seat across from me. He nodded at my cup. "Makes you think too much, huh?" I gave a faint smile. "More than I can handle." He extended a hand. "Name's Carl. Been here a few weeks." I shook it, his grip rough, but sincere. "Robert." Carl leaned back, eyes studying me like he could read the weight on my shoulders. "You lost someone." My throat tightened. I simply nodded. He didn't push, just gave a slow nod back, like he understood loss without needing the details. We sat in silence for a while, the noise of the cafeteria filling the gap. But my mind wasn't done with me yet. Shadows kept pulling me deeper, dragging me to moments I hadn't thought about in years. I remembered the night Emily told me she was marrying Mark. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the same one that was now off limits to me. She had been glowing with excitement, her voice bubbling as she spoke about the man she loved. I listened, forcing a smile, but deep inside a flicker of doubt had stirred. "Dad, he makes me feel safe," she had said. Safe. That word stuck with me. Something in Mark's eyes, even back then, had unsettled me. They were sharp, watchful, as if always measuring, always calculating. I never voiced it, though. What father wants to risk breaking his daughter's joy? A sigh escaped me as I sat in that shelter. Maybe if I had spoken, if I had asked her to wait, to think it through, maybe things would have been different. But regrets are heavy things. They can bury you if you let them. Carl cleared his throat, pulling me back. "I used to have a daughter," he said quietly. "Haven't seen her in years. Divorce messed it all up." I studied his face, the way his eyes softened when he spoke of her. There was pain there, the kind that never really goes away. For the first time since stepping into the shelter, I felt a flicker of connection. Loss wears many faces, but the ache is universal. The morning dragged into late hours. I wandered through the shelter, my steps carrying me past bulletin boards filled with faded job postings and community announcements. A flyer caught my eye. It was old, edges curled, but it announced a family event at a nearby park. Seeing the word family, written in bold letters, twisted something inside me. I thought of all the Sundays Emily and I had spent at that very park, tossing a frisbee, sharing sandwiches, watching other families gather around picnic tables. Back then, it had felt like we were enough, just the two of us. I'd promised her she'd never feel alone. And in many ways, she had been my anchor too. Losing her mother had nearly drowned me. But Emily pulled me back every single time, with her stubborn love. Now, sitting in a shelter, I felt the irony. Without her, I was adrift again, more lost than ever. As the day wore on, I tried to rest in my assigned cot, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, more shadows crowded in. I remembered Emily's last weeks, her tired eyes, the way her voice wavered on the phone. I should have visited more, should have asked harder questions, but I told myself she was strong, like always. I hadn't wanted to face the possibility that she was slipping away. The guilt pressed down like a weight on my chest. I buried my face in my hands, whispering her name into the silence of the dormitory. No one responded, but I wasn't expecting them to. Later that evening, dinner was served, a thin soup with stale bread. I sat at a long table with Carl and a few others. They swapped stories of odd jobs and rough breaks. I listened quietly, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought of Emily's wedding reception, the one I'd saved for months to pay for. I could still see the twinkle lights strung across the hall, her laughter as she danced, the way she hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Dad." Those words echoed louder than the chatter around me. She had thanked me, but now, sitting here, I wondered if I had done enough. Did she know, truly know, how much she meant to me? That night, when lights went out and the shelter grew quiet, the shadows pressed harder than ever. Sleep finally pulled me under, but dreams offered no escape. I saw her face, her smile fading into Mark's sneer, the two images colliding until I woke in a cold sweat. I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. The shadows of the past weren't going anywhere. They had followed me here, and they would follow me still. But as painful as they were, I realized something. They reminded me of who I was, of the love I had given, and of the strength I still carried. And maybe, just maybe, they would guide me through the darkness ahead. I lay staring at the ceiling long after the others had drifted into heavy sleep. The shelter was quiet except for the occasional cough or the rustle of blankets. My heart was still racing from the dream. Emily's face melting into Mark's sneer, two images I couldn't separate no matter how hard I tried. I closed my eyes, whispered her name again, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. Sleep never returned. When dawn finally broke, I dragged myself to the cafeteria, where the air smelled faintly of burnt toast and weak coffee. Carl was already there, waving me over with a tired grin. "You look like you wrestled with ghosts all night," he said. I managed a dry chuckle. Something like that. We ate in silence, both of us lost in our own worlds. After breakfast, I stepped outside for fresh air. The morning was cool, the kind that pricked your skin awake. The city was alive again, buses groaning down the street, shopkeepers unlocking doors, strangers rushing to jobs I no longer had. I leaned against the wall, watching it all, wondering where I belonged in this moving world. That's when I saw him. A thin man in a postal jacket approached the shelter's front desk, carrying a small bundle of envelopes. He set them down, exchanged a few words with the receptionist, and left without noticing me. Normally, I wouldn't have cared. Mail wasn't meant for people like me anymore. I had no home, no address, no place where a letter could find me. But something tugged at me. I went back inside just as the receptionist began sorting through the pile. Her voice carried across the room. "Robert Miller?" I froze. No one had called my name in days. Slowly, I stepped forward. She held out a plain envelope, my name written across it in familiar handwriting. My stomach dropped. Emily's handwriting. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. The paper soft, but weighted like a stone. I stared at the letters of my name, each stroke carved into my memory from the years of birthday cards, notes left on the fridge, grocery lists we'd scribbled together. The room seemed to fade around me. I clutched the envelope to my chest and walked to the far corner, away from the noise. My knees felt weak, so I sat down, heart pounding in my ears. Carl noticed, his eyes narrowing. "You okay, Robert?" I shook my head, unable to form words. My throat burned. It took me several minutes before I gathered the courage to tear it open. Inside was a folded piece of paper, slightly creased, as if it had been handled many times before reaching me. I unfolded it slowly, and there it was, her voice, alive again through ink. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say everything I wanted while I was still here." The words blurred through my tears. My chest heaved, but I forced myself to keep going. Each sentence was like a thread, pulling me back into her presence, making her real again, if only for a moment. She wrote about memories we shared, her gratitude for my sacrifices, her regret for not protecting me better from Mark's coldness. One line cut deeper than the rest. "I know he pushed you away, Dad, and I know it hurt. But please remember, you'll always have a home in my heart, no matter where you are." I pressed the paper to my face, inhaling as though her scent might linger on it. Around me, the shelter carried on, voices, footsteps, clattering trays, but I was somewhere else entirely, sitting at our kitchen table again, her laughter bouncing off the walls. Carl walked over and sat quietly beside me. He didn't pry, didn't ask questions. He just rested a hand on my shoulder, a silent gesture of understanding. It steadied me, just enough to keep reading. Toward the end of the letter, her words shifted. "Dad, if Mark ever treats you unfairly, know that you don't deserve it. I left something for you, something important. It will find its way to you when you need it most." I froze, reading the sentence again and again. Something she left for me? My mind spun, but the letter ended there, signed with her name and a shaky heart drawn beside it. My pulse raced. What had she meant? And how had this letter found me here, of all places? I folded it carefully, my hand still trembling, and slid it back into the envelope. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something stir in me. Not just grief, but a spark of purpose. Carl finally spoke. "That from your daughter?" I nodded, my voice breaking. She's gone. But she found a way to reach me." He leaned back, studying me. "Then you hold on to that. Letters like that, they're lifelines." The rest of the day passed in a haze. I carried the envelope everywhere, tucked safely in my pocket, as though losing it would mean losing her all over again. I read it again after lunch, then again before dinner, each time uncovering a new layer of comfort and mystery. What had she left for me? Where would I find it? That night, as the shelter lights dimmed and the world outside quieted, I lay awake, clutching the envelope against my chest. My grief was still there, raw and heavy, but it no longer felt like the end. For the first time since Emily's passing, I felt a thread tying me forward. The shadows of the past hadn't vanished, but now, in my hands, I held proof that my daughter's love reached beyond them. And I knew this envelope was only the beginning of something far greater. I didn't sleep much that night. The letter lay pressed against my chest, as though keeping it close would keep Emily's voice alive in me. Every time my eyes closed, I heard her words, soft, steady, filled with more love than I thought paper could hold. By morning, something had shifted. The grief was still there, but it no longer sat like a weight crushing me. It had become something sharper, something that gave me focus. After breakfast, I stepped outside into the cool air. The city buzzed around me, horns blaring, people weaving through crosswalks, the smell of roasted coffee spilling from a corner shop. Life was moving on, and for the first time since she died, I felt the faintest pull to move with it. I fingered the envelope in my pocket. Emily's hint lingered in my mind. I left something for you. It will find its way when you need it most. That thought carried me down the street, past storefronts and alleys, until my feet stopped in front of the house I once called home. The curtains were drawn. The lawn was overgrown, edges jagged and untrimmed. It didn't look like the place Emily had loved so much. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding. Then I rang the bell. The door opened, and there was Mark. His face paled the instant he saw me. "You," he hissed. "What are you doing here?" I held the envelope in the air, my hand steady. "Emily left this for me." His eyes darted to the paper, and I could see it, the fear. He tried to cover it, crossing his arms like a man who thought he still held power. "You don't belong here, Robert. I told you to leave. Don't come back." But his voice lacked the bite it once had. I stepped closer, my voice low but clear. "She trusted me more than she ever trusted you. And now I know why." For a moment, neither of us spoke. A neighbor across the street paused in her gardening, watching with quiet curiosity. Curtains shifted in the window next door. Word would spread. Mark's bravado crumbled. His lips pressed into a tight line, and he muttered, "Fine. Come in." The house smelled stale. Dust coated the furniture. Emily's photos still hung on the walls, but something about them felt wrong, as though the air itself had pushed her presence out. I followed him to the kitchen, where he poured himself a drink, his hands unsteady. He pointed at the envelope. "What does it say?" I unfolded the letter, careful not to damage the fragile paper. My voice shook as I read aloud Emily's final words, her love for me, her mistrust of him, her promise that she'd left something behind. Each sentence landed like a stone between us, shattering whatever image he still held of control. By the time I finished, his head was buried in his hands. "Do you understand now?" I asked, my voice breaking but strong. She wanted me here. This was her home, and by her words, it still is mine. Mark said nothing. His silence was enough. I stood, walked through the living room, and sat in Emily's favorite chair, the one by the window where she used to sip tea in the mornings. My chest swelled with grief and peace all at once. For the first time, I felt her with me, not as a ghost of sorrow, but as a steady presence urging me forward. Mark followed slowly, his shoulders slumped. "I didn't know she wrote that," he admitted. His voice was hoarse, stripped of arrogance. I thought everything would be mine when she was gone." I looked at him, and for a fleeting second, I saw not just the man who betrayed me, but the emptiness that drove him. "You lost her long before you lost this house," I said quietly. His eyes flicked to the floor. He had no answer. The neighbors' whispers drifted faintly through the open window. They'd seen me return. They'd seen me step inside. Word would spread like wildfire. Robert Miller had come back, and the truth was no longer hidden. Mark muttered something about needing air and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. I didn't chase him. I just sat there, the letter still in my hand, Emily's words wrapped around me like armor. The house was quiet again, but not the suffocating quiet it had been the night she was buried. This quiet felt like possibility. I spent the afternoon walking through each room. Dust clung to my fingertips as I touched the shelves, the picture frames, the doorknobs. Memories rose with every step. Emily's laughter in the hallway, her voice echoing from the kitchen, the way she'd sneak into my room as a child after nightmares. It hurt, but it was a good hurt, one that reminded me I was alive and she had loved me fiercely. When I reached her bedroom, I noticed a small box tucked beneath her dresser. My knees creaked as I bent down and pulled it out. Inside were photos, letters, and a key labeled in her handwriting. For Dad. Tears blurred my vision as I held the key. She had meant for me to find this. It wasn't just a house. It was her final gift, a way of telling me I still belonged. By evening, I was back in the living room. The sun dipped low, painting the walls in soft orange. I sat with the letter in one hand and the key in the other, the weight of both grounding me. Carl's words from the shelter returned to me. Letters like that, they're lifelines. He was right. Emily had given me more than a letter. She had given me a way back, not just to a house, but to myself. As night fell, I brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window, just as she used to. The city lights shimmered in the distance. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was finding my way back.